On July 7, the fourth day of the voyage out of Italy, the Cape Ray reached a spot west of the island of Crete that was judged to be far enough from land to begin its mission. On the bridge, the officer of the watch noted the weather exactly at noon. Only a slight northeasterly breeze tugged at the colors atop the ship's mast. Yet the sea itself was choppy, with moderate swells of up to 6 feet, a bit rough for the Mediterranean in midsummer. Captain Rick Jordan had already extended the ship's stabilizers to smooth out the ride. Now he slowed the ship to just over 6 knots, a virtual crawl. This would be the ship's cruising speed until the last barrel of Syrian chemicals was destroyed. One routine entry on the ship's log for July the 7th was never filled in. Under the spaces reserved for noting latitude and longitude, the officers of the watch wrote only the word classified. For the next 45 days, the Cape Ray's geographic coordinates would be regarded as an official secret. Just west of the island of Crete. Ooh. Tim Blades' men put on their protective suits and slipped through a plastic airlock to get into position, while others took their seats in the control room and checked their monitors and gauges. Then, at exactly 1:16 p.m., someone flipped a switch, and the first of the ship's two Margarita machines hummed to life. A dusty tank containing 528 gallons of binary sarin precursor was wheeled into place and connected by tubes to the hydrolysis machine. Pumps shot twin streams of poison and water through a maze of pipes, forcing the liquids to mix under pressure. The diluted fluids then spilled into a mixing tank in which caustic soda was added to neutralize the still lethal hydrofluoric acid, the bone seeker. At last, the final product, a relatively harmless broth, the color of watery blue Kool-Aid, was pumped through hoses into storage tanks arrayed across the ship's decks. It took less than 5 hours to process the first batch. Then another 8,000-pound vat of sarin precursor was wheeled out and the process was repeated. Blades hovered over his creation like a nervous parent, watching and offering suggestions. In one hand, he clutched a roll of paper strips. These were PH testing papers of the kind used in school laboratory experiments. The strips are formulated to turn bright red in the presence of a strong acid, or blue when exposed to an alkaline substance such as lye. As he walked, Blades kept his head down, looking intently for the stray droplet of or sweaty pipe fitting that might signify that a valve or joint was about to blow, spewing deadly chemicals everywhere. When he saw something suspicious, he dabbed the moist spot with PH paper. He walked and dabbed throughout much of the first day. So far, so good, he thought. Just 76 more containers to go. On the bridge, the mission's other leaders were beginning to contemplate a potential crisis of a different order of magnitude. Among the deck officers, there was a growing fear that the ship, under certain circumstances, might be at risk of suddenly rolling on its side, filling up with water, and sinking. Every modern container ship employs a computer program that charts the weight distribution of cargo, fuel, and ballast to ensure that the vessel remains upright. Normally, the calculations are made at the start of the voyage and then forgotten because, in almost all cases, cargo doesn't move around. Roll on, roll off ships, ROROs, are notoriously top heavy, and special care has to be taken to ensure that the vessels remain stable as they burn off fuel, which is stored on a lower deck and helps preserve the ship's stability. Over the years, maritime records have documented the capsizing of several large ROROs in relatively calm seas, accidents often blamed on the crew's failure to achieve a proper balance on board. The Cape Ray was no ordinary RORO. Tanks holding millions of gallons of liquids were dispersed over all five of the ship's decks, and those liquids were constantly moving around. Each day, workers emptied at least two of the 8,000-pound vats of liquid poisons into Blades' hydrolysis machines. They also drew thousands of gallons of fresh water from ballast tanks below the ship's hold and pumped prodigious quantities of liquid waste into empty storage bins, many of which were stacked away on the top deck. Meanwhile, the Cape Ray's supply of diesel, also stored below decks, diminished a little each day as the ship burned through its fuel supply. Slowly but surely, much of the ballast was shifting from the bottom of the ship to the top. The daily changes were recorded on a spreadsheet kept by the Cape Ray's second mate, and the new figures were scribbled on a whiteboard outside Jordan's cabin and entered into a computer program that rendered the ship as a two-dimensional animation. A large green boat resting on a flat plane that represented the ocean. In the animation, green meant stability, while a crimson ship was at risk of capsizing. The trend was unmistakable. Each day, as the liquid cargo shifted around, the boat was inching closer to the red. Jordan could feel it happening. As the chemical processing continued, a noticeable change occurred in the Cape Ray's response to ocean swells. Instead of the usual rhythm, roll right, recovery, roll left, recovery, it stayed in the roll much longer, only gradually returning to the upright position. The ride actually feels smoother, Jordan said, but that's when you really start to worry. At some point, he knew there was a risk that a large swell could push the ship to one side and it might not come back. And so each morning, the senior officers, including Blades, would meet to discuss the day's progress and chart the latest changes in weight distribution. Refueling to add ballast was not an easy option. No port would grant entrance to a ship loaded with chemical weapons. From now on, they would be in a race to finish the work before the fuel level dropped below the point where stability was lost. Blades had mentally calculated how long it would take to destroy the entire load of chemicals from Syria. It would be about 39 days, plus a few additional days for maintenance and repairs, and then more time to get to a port where the ship could unload the waste and refuel. He let his eyes run along the lines of the graph. This would be close. According to his calculations, by the time everything was finished, the Cape Ray would be 3 days away from turning red. Once we reach the point where we've burned that much fuel, he said, we're screwed. The deck officers had another problem, much nearer to hand. On the day of the Cape Ray's departure from Italy, news stories about the American ship and its cargo of poisons had ignited a furor in countries up and down the Mediterranean. Anger over the mission intensified with word that the destruction work had officially begun. On both the Greek mainland and on the island of Crete, activists vowed to do more than carry picket signs. We didn't have a clue back then in 2014 here in Greece. I don't know what he's talking about here, Mr. Πώς το λέει εδώ? How it says, Joby Warwick? Ναι. We didn't have a clue here in Greece. Older inhabitants could still recall the wholesale dumping of old chemical munitions into the Mediterranean at the end of World War II, and the possibility of a fresh threat to fishing and tourism touched a nerve. In the Cretan city of Chania, a large band of civic organizations and unions began preparing to mobilize a fleet of vessels to intercept the American ship at sea. The organizers called on fishermen and anyone else who has a boat to join in. We warned them long before they started, read a statement released by the combined opposition groups in Chania on July the 10th. They decided, using concealment and silence by the mass media, yes, to move on. We decided to meet them at sea. We are coming. Getting close to the Cape Ray would not be easy. The vessel was accompanied by US and European naval frigates, whose task was to keep outsiders well away. But no one believed that NATO gunboats would ever open fire on fishing boats filled with unarmed protesters. If some got through, the Cape Ray, under normal circumstances, could simply outrun them. But with the hydrolysis machines running, the boat was cruising at less than a third its normal speed. It was at least plausible that a few of the trawlers and yachts could maneuver themselves into the Cape Ray's path and force it to turn or stop. In the weeks that followed, and especially as the planned protest date approached, Jordan and Dromer Hauser kept a continuous lookout for the flotilla, knowing all the while that there was little they could do if they spotted it. Oh, well, Jordan said to Blades one day as the two digested the latest news about the protest ships. You can't please everybody.